How many of you, is this your first national conference you've gone to? Okay, all of you who are raising your hands, look at these folks up here, because these are the folks that sponsored this conference and made it possible. So when you need services, when you need consulting, think about them first. Okay, they're making this transformational moment possible. So I am Brian Frederick. I am the retired CEO of the Community Foundation of Lorain County in Ohio. I've got my own consulting firm. I'm doing a bit of work with Expert Alley and Clients. I'm part owner in a company that does an online donor portal. I have a new dog and do a lot of hiking, and I'm really enjoying retirement. But I'd like to invite our panel to come up and join me, and we'll try to keep things moving this morning. I'm going to keep talking while they're coming up, and I don't want to be rude, but I want to make sure that we've got time for some questions. So I have to admit that it was sometime after I agreed to do this panel that I realized that the title, Old School Meets New School, I'm old school. And I don't mind being a dinosaur, because my 2 decades at the Community Foundation of Lorain County really helped me understand the power of the Community Foundation and the potential of the field. When I joined back in 1997, the world was very different. And I'd like to, if I can, for a few minutes, paint that picture as a contrast to what we're going to talk about today. Community foundations in 1997 were extremely connected throughout the United States. Colleagues met, thousands of colleagues met every fall at the Constellation Foundation Fall Community Foundation Conference to learn from one another, to talk about the field, to talk about the world, and figure out how we fit into it. It was a vibrant conversation. And it's not unlike what we have today. There was, outside of the year, people were connected through CEONet and ProNet and AdNet and Comma listservs, and there was vibrant discussions going on. And you throw out a problem, and at the end of the day, you've got 20 potential responses to it. The field was led by a number of giants who had led their community foundations for decades. And they had a profound impact on all of us newbies that were entering the field, many of them providing mentorship and sharing their thoughts and sharing their wisdom. Community foundations had an extremely strong commitment to give back and to share. It was almost an expectation of the field. In fact, I've lovingly over the years called it our expectation of plagiarism. Because we create one thing in a community foundation, we share it with others to see whether it works in their community. Most of the newbies were mentored by those with experience, and our orientation to the field came through networking. Because at that time, we didn't have anything called Community Foundation Fundamentals or CF Express training. There was an ongoing vibrant dialogue about the future of community foundations, and in the late 90s, this was fueled by the advent and huge initial success of commercial charitable funds like Fidelity and Vanguard. And frankly, community foundation conferences were often with a topic of how do we compete? And we found out very quickly we can't. There was a lot of R&D going on. There was a national marketing action team that had something like 8 CDs of marketing material that was plug and play for any community foundation. We had Community Foundations of America that was created, which was a virtual support organization that tried to do a number of things for the field. We had a number of affinity groups that came. Many of them went away, but some of them are still very much in play because they're providing value, like CF Leads and CF Insights. The global movement caught the attention of several foundations, including the C.S. Mott Foundation, the Bertelsmann Foundation in Germany, and the King Baudouin Foundation in Belgium. And they, for a number of years, supported a rich dialogue and exchange through the Transatlantic Community Foundation Network. Steve Alley, Rick Frost, actually that's where we met Svetlana. Several folks in the room, Steve, I think you were involved with the Transatlantic Community Foundation Fellowship that the German Marshall Fund put on, where folks from the U.S. went over to Europe for 3 weeks, and European Community Foundation folks came over to the U.S. to work in community foundations. Interestingly, the global movement was fairly nascent at that point in time. Today, over half of the community foundations in the world are outside the United States. That's pretty significant movement. Now, context is everything in the community foundation world, and the context back then was we were at the end of the tech bubble. Okay? The economy and return on investment was great. You could throw a dart at a stock board and pick stocks and get 20-30% return on investment. And what that meant was the foundations of philanthropy were flush with cash. Private foundations have to give up 5%, so in markets like that, they got a lot of money to give up. And they were supporting a lot of stuff, and there were a number of foundations that were supporting capacity building to a large extent for community foundations. The first national standards, I believe, was totally sponsored by the Kellogg Foundation. They funded the whole first round and development. And that was big. And many of the larger community foundations had excess money at that point in time, and they were giving back to the community. They were giving back to the country. They were trying to build a field. And then the aughts happened. Okay? We had a decade with 2 significant recessions. Okay. Now, I'd like to have another raise of hands. How many of you started in your community foundation 2009 to today? Oh, you got the biggest lesson in community philanthropy coming ahead of you. Because if you haven't lived through a period of time where you go to your board and say, since the beginning of the year, we've lost 30% of our market value, you haven't lived. Okay? And that was kind of what it was like there. And trust me, it's coming, and you're going to have fun with it. As philanthropy was struggling with the market adjustment, capacity building faded. A lot of the money and a lot of the effort that was going into it just went away, and it had to. There was a significant retirement of many of these giants leaving the field, and that brought in a lot of great new ideas and fresh ideas, but we lost a lot of the culture of community foundations during that period too, because some of that wisdom went away with folks. There was a lot of new innovation happening, most of it outside the community foundation world, okay? And it had to do with social media and technology and options for donors. And in fact, in 2003, the field got a wake-up call with On the Brink of New Promise, where the consultants that put that together said, basically, community foundations, figure out what your value add is to your community, or face obsolescence. And so we had a real start, and that's where a lot of emphasis on the stuff we've been doing all along, community leadership, impact investing, that's where a lot of the genesis came, because we had to figure out what our value add was, because donors can get what we do almost anywhere, and sometimes much cheaper and much better than how we provide it. And with all of these challenges, our support organizations, the council on foundations, the regional associations, were facing the same kind of challenges, and they were trying to figure out how do we scale a structure that we could continue to provide service, but still make the bottom line meet. And so many of them went to a common denominator approach, where they looked at, we're serving corporate philanthropy, private foundations, community foundations, what do they have in common, and how can we provide service? And so we had a lot of grant making and a lot of impact programming, but for community foundations, very little marketing, very little asset development, very little business model within their support organizations. So that's kind of the context, but as you know, the world changes, and it continues to evolve, and we've had decades. And so today, we've asked 3 of your colleagues, the newer schoolers in the Community Foundation, to come and give us a glimpse of what their world is like and what their view of Community Foundation is. So I'd like to introduce on my far right, Brian Fogel, who's been the president of the Community Foundation of the Ozarks since 2008. Around there, Neil Hajra from Ann Arbor Community Foundation, and he's been the CEO since 2015, I think, but you were at the Community Foundation earlier than that, right? And Andrew Mueller, who's the executive director of the Russell Area Community Foundation, that's an affiliate of Greater Salina here in Kansas, and you've been executive director since 2010. And I also understand you're an artist. So I Googled her as we were looking, and the first thing that came up was art. So let's welcome our panel today. So we want to have a bit of an informal discussion. We're going to open it up to Q&A if you have any questions in a little bit, and get wrapped up at, what time do we wrap up? 8? Okay, great. So if you would, give us a snapshot of your community and your community foundation. So, let's go first. Okay.
So, I am old school. I still have a flip phone, so even though I'm new. And Brian, just to remember back, reflect back, I started the Community Foundation September 1st of 2008. Lehman Brothers failed 4 days later. So it was a heck of a time to leave banking and a heck of a time to start the Community Foundation. And my staff said, you know, things were pretty good till you got here. So that's how I got started. We are a regional community foundation. We cover the southern part of our state in Missouri. We have assets of about $300 million. We have 49 affiliates from Kansas all the way to the Mississippi River. We are the 70th largest community foundation in the country, but we are the 6th busiest in terms of transactions. So last year we had 34,000 grants and gifts in total. So we have about 3,200 funds, and it's a busy place to work.
Hey folks, as a Michigander, I need to ask you to look at your right hand, palm up, point to the patty part at the base of your thumb, and that's where Ann Arbor is located. And so we're the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation. We actually serve the county of Washtenaw County. It's a county of 360,000. I describe us as mostly a suburban county with a bit of urban on the east side and a bit of rural. Not Kansas rural, but a bit of rural. On the west side of our county, we've been in business since 1963, and we're mostly known for the University of Michigan is based out of Ann Arbor, and the only other observation I would make is our name is actually a liability within our own county, because anywhere we go other than in Ann Arbor, and again, we're the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation, we hear the, oh, here come the folks from Ann Arbor again. And so there's no such thing as too local, is what I've learned by being at my community foundation for 10 years. And I'm sure that hopefully resonates with a lot of you, but it's something we still deal with every day, despite already being a very local institution.
All right, good morning. My name is Angela. I'm with the Russell County Area Community Foundation. I'm a part-time executive director in a small county in north central Kansas. My dad was a veterinarian in the county, and he used to joke that we had more cows than people in Russell County, which may be true because we have a population of about 6,000 for the entire county. And so our community foundation was founded in 2001 by people who were concerned that things were changing in Russell County. And they wanted to make sure that there was a Russell County that was going to be around for generations to enjoy. And so we're getting close to our 20th anniversary, and our sole purpose is to make sure that we help preserve our rural way of life.
So you are rural Kansas.
We are rural Kansas.
Okay. You know, traditionally community foundations, the bread and butter of our work is really encouraging local people to give back to the community, to steward those assets, and then make grants for those assets. So over time, and where you're at right now, what does that bread and butter look like for your community foundation? Are you doing things different in developing assets and grant making? And I guess more importantly, is that still our bread and butter, or is something else our bread and butter today? Answer a little bit.
Yeah, we're doing things a little differently in Russell County. We're trying to be, even though we're a small community foundation, we're trying to have a real big impact in preserving our rural way of life, like I said. And we're doing that through grant making. And we were really excited a few years ago. We had what we call the Think Big grant. We squirreled away $30,000 worth of money, and we were going to make a big grant for that. And we did some neat things for a few years. We helped build a playground, we helped put the awning over the baseball field, and we helped the thrift store build an annex. And we thought, well, those were really neat things, and those helped those organizations, but they really didn't push the needle very much on preserving our rural way of life and having that multiplier. So we decided a few years ago to have a program called SPARK, the Strategic Partnership for the Advancement of Russell County. And we were going to spark something really neat. And the board met and decided, the thing that we think would have the biggest multiplier would be to do something with economic development. Now, I don't know if any of my rural friends are probably nodding their head, yeah, economic development would really help us out. So we set aside our unrestricted funds for several years, and we offered the SPARK program. And we awarded a $175,000 grant to an organization that had to do three things. It had to have a project with significant economic development. It had to have long-term measured impact. And really important, it had to have community collaboration. We wanted to bring together entities to work together. We couldn't work alone anymore. It was too important. We had to bring people together. So we had those 3 pillars, and we had a pretty long application process, but we ended up awarding 2 grants. One was a $175,000 grant to a nonprofit to purchase 20 acres of agricultural real estate and develop that into commercial real estate. So we're hoping to really develop that area along I-70, and the multiplier could be several millions of dollars down the road. And then the second project, we gave $25,000 worth of seed money to an organization that wasn't quite as far along, but was doing really neat things, and that's to the Post-Rock Coalition. Wow, they're an 18-county coalition that wants to develop Post-Rock area into a major tourism destination similar to the Flint Hills. And Post-Rock country is evidence that our part of Kansas was once an ancient ocean, and we have these greenhorn limestone deposits. And when settlers came west, there wasn't a lot of wood to build things, and so they used post-rock, they used limestone. And they're looking to develop that into a tourist destination, and we provided seed money for that. So those are our 2 examples of the programs that we did for economic development that we hope will have a big multiplier.
Great. So don't pass the microphone because I got a question. So I have taught Community Foundation fundamentals, and if anybody's taken that, there's these sections in the training called tugs and pulls, because we know in this field there's always pros and cons. Great projects. What was the impact of the foundation into grant making with holding back unrestricted dollars for that one time?
Well, we were really fortunate because we're also in the Dane Hansen service area, and so they gave us funds to grant on their behalf. So we were able to still meet all the needs in our county with those funds while holding back the other funds.
Oh, that's good. Okay. You?
Sure. I wanted to start with a story. I used to be a grant seeker for a decade before joining my community foundation. And I'd listen to foundations talk a lot about how they've evolved beyond grant making. And it'd be noise in one of my ears, and I'd say, and wait to get to the grant conversation. So no matter how much we want to evolve beyond grant making being maybe old-fashioned, maybe that's not our decision, and we're under no illusions that most nonprofits really see us as a source of revenue. So I think that's always going to be part of what we do. So we focus more on acknowledging that we alone don't have the scale to move the needle in our community on the big issues we want to take on. So we've tried specializing in collaborative grant making. We declared that no major program will be conducted without partner funders. And again, we're lucky to be in a community where there are other funders, so I want to acknowledge that. So we have partnerships with city and county institutions, we have partnerships with hospitals, we have partnerships with private family foundations that are small and local, we have partnerships with very large regional foundations, all to pursue the magnifying effect. The only other thing I'll mention is we also have talked a lot about our unique value add, and it's not fundraising and it's not grant making. There are more fundraisers than ever, especially with crowdsourced fundraising. And by the same token, there are more grant makers than ever with crowdsourcing, with health foundation conversions, and giving circles, and the democratization of giving. So we concluded that our only unique value add is permanent community capital. It's endowment dedicated to our community of Washington County. And by acknowledging that, first of all, that enabled us to partner with others rather than seeing them as competition. The United Way for us is a great ally. They have a different model, so we're not in competition. And we've really tried focusing our whole community on the one thing we do that nobody else does is permanent community capital for Washington County. And if that's not what you're interested in, that's great. We're going to save you a lot of time and hassle, and you can move on. But if you're interested in long-term views and legacy, then we're a good place.
So Neil, I've noticed that in a lot of communities, community foundations are the new anchor institutions, that our businesses are emerging and leaving the country and not necessarily there. In Marin County, we have no community banks anymore, and it used to be the bank presidents that were, the go-to people. Ann Arbor has a lot of resources. Is the Community Foundation in Ann Arbor viewed as one of the anchor institutions that's going to be there forever? Or is there competition for that role, I guess?
So I think we're viewed among the things that make our region a great region. So we're part of that mix. But you're right that we're not the economic development institution. We have a very strong World One. We have a strong United Way system in our county. We have a strong banking system. We have a pretty strong system of civic institutions as well. So our goal is to actually elevate and enhance all of those other institutions. And here's how we see it. They are our liberators. They enable us to focus very deliberately on areas that aren't being covered by them, but we don't feel the pressure to do, like Angela's doing, economic development, certain kinds of civic engagement. So we're grateful to be among what you might say are competitors, because they actually enable a focus that otherwise wouldn't be possible.
I love it. So I'm going to plagiarize, if you don't mind that phrase, they are our liberators. I love that. I love it. So with over 30,000 transactions a year, you guys are still doing a lot of taking in gifts and making grants.
We are, and I think one of the things that make community foundations work is they're place-based. So what we do at Springfield is different than what we do in Mountain Grove. And to Neil's point, we do a lot of plan giving and talking about estate planning in small communities. We use Don and his firm to do transfer of wealth. And again, in our rural places, people understand that. They know their wealth is leaving, it's following their children. And we've had several $1 million gifts in small communities that go into the permanent endowment. And again, we got one in a small town, $1.2 million last year, that is transformational. I mean, they're grant making, they're giving away $60,000, $70,000 a year. In a small community, that goes a long way. What we do in Springfield is a little bit different. I think we've got we're doing rural economic development in our smaller communities. But in Springfield, we have a very strong chamber, so we work with them. But again, maybe they're our liberators too, Neil. We focus, if bread and butter is asset development and grant making, I'm a big believer that leadership is jelly. And we spend a lot of time on leadership. We did a session yesterday on the opioid crisis. We took a lead in that. So there's a lot of subjects that I think we can add value to.
So Angela, you talked about a couple of innovations that you've done, and certainly the world is changing. You guys, can you give us some examples of things that you've done that have been out of the ordinary, a bit of a stretch, a bit of maybe a risk for your community?
So we've been doing mission-related investing for about 10 years. So we've done a couple of interesting things. One, in Ozark County, there's probably 8,000 people there off in the Mark Twain Forest. Wood chips are plentiful. And we did a lease purchase on a biomass heater for their school system. We own a biomass HVAC system. We lease it to the school system. That was about $1 million investment. And if anything's plentiful, it's wood chips. That's what they burn, saving them about $70,000 or $80,000 a year. Most recently, we put a loan loss reserve in one of our credit unions. Missouri has almost, what we do have usury on payday lending. It's 1,200%. So payday lending is a huge issue in our state, and so we work with the credit union on refinancing those. We put a loan loss reserve. We're leveraging ours about 10 to 1 for their corpus and our loan loss reserve. We've only had one go bad in about a year and a half of refinancing those. So again, saving folks, getting them out of that debt trap. So again, a couple of things we're doing just on mission-related.
That's fantastic.
I'll give two examples, but I want to tie it back to really, I consider myself a traditionalist in the field. I just believe in new strategies to pursue traditional goals. So scholarships have been around for a century with community foundations. And so I'll mention, I don't know if you call it innovation, but we actually stopped. We took a pause and asked ourselves, are these scholarships helping students graduate? And also we realized that we were losing money on scholarships, and was that sustainable? And by definition, the answer was no. So we actually we identified a new scholarship program that addressed the needs of students who would most benefit from scholarships. And that I know a lot of you do, but here's the corollary to that. We stopped accepting scholarship donations to any other kinds of scholarship funds. So what we said is we'll run the 45 programs we promised people we would run in the past. Our promise is a promise, we'll keep those forever. But we will no longer start new boutique scholarship funds based on donor preferences. If you want a scholarship fund at the foundation, it has to align with our flagship program that focuses on low-income students, students of color, and first-generation college students. 5-year scholarships, college success coach with every scholar, and an emergency fund for those students as well, because our metric had changed from giving a scholarship out to graduating those students from college, a 2-year, a 4-year, not just the 4-year institutions. And so the one thing I'll share about that, I'll call it the innovation for us, is when we started saying no to donors, guess what happened? Our scholarship revenues tripled annually after we started doing that, because so many donors wanted to be aligned with that program. The second thing I'll mention, again, it's a very old school instinct that I think all community foundations boards have had for the last century, which is how do you cultivate the next generation of philanthropists, right? And a lot of us are really good at high school and young kid philanthropy, right? The youth councils and learning to give and those sorts of programs. And of course we work with a lot of, I'd say, upper middle-aged and more experienced donors. But the 20 and 30 somethings are tough, right, to engage because they're not necessarily ready to give, they're busy with their families. In our community, there happens to be a growing and thriving tech and biotech industry spawned out of our university, right? It's a classic university town scenario. So just this year, we launched the Ann Arbor Entrepreneurs Fund, and it's a different kind of fund. It asks an entrepreneur to commit 1% of her or his equity in her company to a permanent, unrestricted fund at the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation. And in just, I think it's been 4 or 5 months, we have 15 entrepreneurs who have signed on for that commitment. And the value proposition for them was, we're going to give you a place where founders can network with each other and learn about the community, because a common refrain we hear from entrepreneurs in our community is we don't want to end up like Silicon Valley, where the tech folks are seen as the enemies of community. And so I want to go back to why we did that. Yes, it's a growth strategy, but it was also a great way to engage what are mostly 20, 30, and 40-somethings who are going to be our future major philanthropists, and we can get involved with them at the ground floor. And we know that a lot of these commitments will either not pay off or not pay off for a long time, but that's not the point. The point is the engagement.
Again, Spark has been our innovative program, but I think the one thing that Spark has really done is bring people together to have conversations, and we've been able to do that by, having them together at the Elks over chicken fingers and talking about things, and just bringing them together to really see that their programs can cooperate, and that they don't have to do little things, they can do a big thing together.
And I don't know whether you noticed the shudder that kind of went through the room when you mentioned the term scholarships. They're often, so I'm going to throw, you go till 2 or till 7:45 or 8:40. Okay. I got one question for you guys, and we didn't talk about this beforehand, but our colleague Webb Kreidler at the Columbus, Ohio Community Foundation has said on several occasions that one of the biggest roles for a community foundation today is to be the biggest cheerleader for the community. What are some ways that you're being a cheerleader for your community?
Can I take a slight exception with that statement?
Sure.
I think one of our biggest roles is to shine a spotlight on the needs of our community as well.
Okay.
And so I think we can leverage so there's great pride in Ann Arbor and the surrounding communities, just like there's great pride in your communities. I feel like our job is to leverage that pride to say, my gosh, we're leaving people behind. My gosh, why is the life expectancy disparity between African Americans and whites in our community 11 years? And by framing it as a point of pride, we find that folks, regardless of their ideological point of view, really agree with that. If we're going to be a great community, we need to be great for everybody. So we are cheerleaders, but I think we don't want to just be blind cheerleaders. We want to say, by being cheerleaders, we have a responsibility to shine a light on where we can be better.
And that's the equity equation.
So we're a partner with several others where they actually lead in something called the Community Focus Report, and we put it out now 15 years. And it's an indicators report, and it's become the one that everybody relies on, governance, nonprofits, but we do blue ribbons and red flags. So we talk about all the things we do well, and we celebrate that. And we just released that again 2 weeks ago, and we had 300 people show up for that. And we talk about all the good that's going on. But to this point, you've also got to shine light on the issues, and the red flags are a big issue for us. And we've done grant making for several years that we would only focus grant making on those red flag issues. And the report is designed to say we all have limited resources. So what are those priorities in our communities? Those are the red flags that we ought to fund. That comes with consternation from folks who say we don't have any red flags and you're not funding us. But again, that was the design of the whole project, was to say let's focus on those things we really need to focus on.
Angela?
I don't have, those are great ideas. I think I'm gonna let those stand.
Okay. So what we want to do for a few minutes is open it up to questions to our panel in the audience.
One of the things I haven't heard you say, and maybe it's been covered elsewhere, but it's something that I've spoken about with Brian, is the benefit that community foundations have to communities in terms of holding nonprofit endowments. Can you speak to that and how that lifts up your community, serves as a sustainability plan for you all, what have you?
And you got to share the microphone.
So our largest single source of funds are nonprofits. We have about 32% of our funds. We have about 700 nonprofits that have funds for us. So that's one of the things that we lift up in our community, that we have, because we're investing several $100 million, we can get better diversity, better asset allocation than you could do on your own having a $50,000 endowment. And again, getting back to Neil's point, is this is permanent capital. They don't have to go out and raise every year. So we've done a lot of endowment matches to get nonprofits to start that, but that's a big part of our business.
And I'll just add that we've doubled down on nonprofit endowments as well for a second reason, in addition to what Brian mentioned. It's a way to diffuse the sense of competition between our grantees and ourselves. And by running matching programs, we're saying we're going to put some of our own skin in the game to make you successful through these funds, because we know that a lot of nonprofits see philanthropy as a zero-sum game, which is not necessarily, so that sometimes our success is seen to their detriment. And we see nonprofit endowments as an important buffer to that perception.
Question?
First of all, bravo. I'm the president of United Way, so thank you for what you're doing. Second, taking on tough issues is tough by definition. And so how do you, as community foundations, take on the tough issues of a community without turning off the other half of the community by saying, well, you're just talking about the negative stuff, and really giving community citizens ownership of their own community?
We've been doing that as part of the Dane Hansen Strategic Doing Program, where they've encouraged us to have community meetings where we get the whole county together and we talk about things that we want to change in rural America and things that we can do. And so that was a great program that kind of got us starting as a community to see, do we need to work on economic development? Do we need to work on blight? Do we need to work on rural housing? And that's really one of the things that snowballed into our Spark program. And so that's great when we get people to come together, and we see our foundation as really one of the unique ways where we can convene people in the county. And as a person said yesterday, when you live in rural America, you know everyone. I mean, you go to school with those people, you go to church with everyone, and so for us it's more like a big family where we're having a conversation on how we can keep our family going and keep our family thriving.
Any questions?
Hi, how's the business community engaging in some of this work with your foundations?
So I came from the banking community, and I thought this is going to be a slam dunk. I can get all these corporate funds. I know all these people. They're my customers. That hadn't worked so well. So that's been tough. We do have a lot of employee benevolence funds. That's been an area that we've been able to grow in. They're a lot of work, but we hope that's a foot in the door. Just last week we had a big philanthropy summit. We brought in speakers from all over the country, and we partnered with our chamber to do that, to get corporations to think more about involving and engaging with us. But as you know in the Giving USA, that corporations only give less than 5% of all charitable contributions. So what we sort of settled on is let's go after their owners. And we're working with the owners of them, and they're doing some wonderful philanthropic work, and that's kind of what we've done, but we haven't been able to engage the business side of things.
Any other questions?
And I'll just mention we came to the same conclusion. Our Entrepreneurs Fund is our first really deliberate effort to engage businesses through their entrepreneur owners, though. So same approach.
Dave, you got any more questions?
question. You guys should consider engaging the B Corp community if you're trying to engage with companies. I don't know if you're familiar with benefit corporations and B Corps, or if all of you are, but that's probably lower hanging fruit. So just a suggestion.
So, what are the big questions or the big challenges that you're facing in your community, and how are you engaged in this?
Well, two things. One is in the nonprofit world, we do a lot of work. We work with them. There's such and Neil mentioned it, a scarcity mentality, and when you look at the world in scarcity, you're competing against each other, and we really try to build on an abundance mentality. I firmly believe that, and I think if we work together, we can create a lot more assets. The other issue that I worry about, and I think is a challenge for all of us, is our role in advocacy. So bad public policy could wipe out everything we do, and we could invest millions of dollars in public policy could wipe that out. We're dipping our toe in the water on that, but I struggle with what's our role in that particular thing, because it sure can either complement or contradict the work we do every day.
Two things on our mind. One is, I'll describe an evolution. We used to be an institution where the board were the experts and sort of decided what was best for the community and what we're going to do about it. Then we evolved to, nonprofits are really the ones who best know what's going on in the community and what we should do about it. And now we're struggling with the move to the next evolution, which is it's community members that we're purporting to help. We should have a much stronger voice for us. And Angela has mentioned it can come much more naturally to certain communities. For us, it doesn't. We're a very highly educated community, so we think if we got our degrees, we know exactly what people need, and that's not true. And so we've been spending 5 years slowly pushing decision-making and information to members of the community, and it takes a ton of work and different kind of staffing and a different mentality. So that's going to be a struggle going forward. The other piece I'll mention, and it relates to policy, is there's two things happening all over the country. Wealth concentration, more wealth at the higher end of the spectrum. And the second is the most recent tax laws disincentivize giving by middle class folks. So if you talk about growing, you can't ignore the fact that that means you're going to be going after fewer donors who have more money. And what does that mean for your community foundation when you're talking about also being the anchor in the community and democratizing giving? And those two things are in tension, and they're going to be in more tension going forward, and we're having a lot of conversations about that.
What's on our mind is the transfer of wealth. We, again, are a rural community. We face a lot of headwinds, I think, rural communities together. We have an aging population, we have young people leaving, we're very agrarian-based. And so, when you have these large farm families, many of you can probably identify, they've been there for generations. And when they pass, their heirs probably don't live in Russell County. And so when they sell the farmland and they leave, the last thing they do is go to the bank and take the money, and that's gone from the county forever. And so what we're concerned about is having those conversations with those families about plan giving and about remembering their county and their communities. And so that when they pass, their legacy can live on in Russell County forever. And so that's something that we're going to be working with. Actually, again, the Dan Hansen Foundation has a Northwest Kansas Gives program that we're going to participate in with a plan giving expert to develop a 3-year plan so that we can have those conversations. And we think it's really an ideal time for Russell County because our 20th anniversary is coming up. And so it's a natural way for us to open the door and have those conversations.
Last question, quick. You guys are the current guard of community foundations. Give us a prediction for the future of community foundations.
I think they'll continue growing and thriving. One of the things I hope we can do is better professionalize our field and again, get folks that just don't only have the passion, but also could go into it and see it as a career. I don't think we've done that well enough yet.
I think impact investing will be more of a norm, say a decade from now. I think whether we like it or not, growth will be driven by fewer philanthropists in each of our communities. And I think this whole community leadership discussion will be the same discussion we're having right now.
I think for for rural America, community foundations are going to be the real leaders. We're uniquely qualified to bring people together across the table, county, local government, schools, to come together and have great conversations. And I hope you'll be inspired, because no matter what your size or how long you've been around, I mean, rural America, we can make this happen, and the Community Foundation can do that.
Well, I want to thank Brian, Neil, and Angela. All of you too, though, because the field doesn't move by one or two people doing something. You guys are the field. You're the leadership. If we want to have a strong culture and connection of community foundations, we got to make it happen. So some of you are going to be the dinosaurs that will be up here 20 years from now doing a panel like this. And the final thought is enjoy the next recession, because it's a heck of a ride. Thank you much.